What is up, fellow nerds, and welcome to Not Your Status Quo's Back to the Editing Room for Batman vs. Superman Dawn of Justice.
And remember, if you like what we do, make sure you hit that subscribe button and share it with all your friends.
And give this video a like, and enjoy a tasty cherry Jolly Rancher while you ring that bell to be notified of future videos. And welcome to Back to the Editing Room, a new feature here at Not Your Status Quo, where we take movies that we all agree we don't like, and we tell you how we would change them to make them better. It's all our opinion, so if you differ, go ahead and throw a comment in, tell us why we're wrong. We'd love to talk to you about it. Just keep it professional and courteous, please. And one of the things is it's got to be a movie we all agree on that we dislike. And this one is probably the one that came to mind first when we decided to do this. It's the one comic book movie that we all agree is probably our least favorite, Batman vs. Superman Dawn of Justice. And we're not just going to talk about the bad. We're also going to look at the parts that we do like about it. And I think we'll kick off with what we do like about this movie. And I think first on my list is the casting. I think, Gal Gadot, Jason Momoa, Ben Affleck, Henry Cavill, Ray Fisher, they all do a great job. There's one person I left out of there we'll talk about in a little bit. But, they've went on to star in their own movies. They do a great job. And I think that is one of the good things that at least Zack Snyder did for this movie is get the right people in the right roles.
Yeah, I definitely kind of agree with most of that. So we've talked about this in some of our other movie and TV show breakdowns and whatnot. We talk about how it's not always the actor's fault. A lot of time it's the direction that they're given. Sometimes it's the writing. So when you're talking about having Ben Affleck as Batman and Bruce Wayne, that's not necessarily a bad casting choice, in my opinion. He portrayed parts of it pretty well, but some of the direction and some of the writing for that character was what threw it off. But as an actor, I think he did a good job.
And the casting for me, obviously, I thought Wonder Woman stole every scene she was in. Gal Gadot did great. I'm not sold on Ben Affleck as Batman or Bruce Wayne, but he's, I'm just, still stuck on the Christian Bale Batman. I thought he was excellent, but he's not bad in any means. I think in my mind, I'm comparing the two. And I should really look at Affleck's work, as in this movie, by itself. And he didn't do bad. So it was for what they had. It was a good casting job. Obviously, I don't want to allude to anything negative yet, and I think I have Keith's same opinion on the same character that he's going to bring up later.
And then second, I have Larry Fong's cinematography. There are so many incredible looking shots in this film. A couple that stand out to me was the Batman on the building grappling away when Doomsday was going to attack him. It looked right out of a comic book. It was so well done. The CGI worked with the scene. It just looked great. And then like Wonder Woman arriving on the scene. And I know Doug had a scene that he wanted to talk about that we've seen a few times before.
So yeah, even though we have seen this a dozen times or more in, animated movies and live action movies, we all know, even in The Joker, we all know how Bruce Wayne's parents die. We all have seen the same iconic images over and over again with Joe Cool or, the Joker, whoever it happens to be in whatever scene. We see Martha and we see Bruce Wayne's parents getting shot. We see the pearls flying. In this case, if you're going to do it, since they have to do it in every Batman feature, if you're going to do it, at least make it look good. And again, going back to what Keith said, with cinematography, this was shot remarkably well. I will say I absolutely love the slow motion sort of shooting of the gun, the pearls flying. Zack Snyder is excellent with that. If you guys have seen his fight scenes in Watchmen, you'll remember that he is actually really good at those kind of scenes. So I will admit, even though it is kind of overplayed, it was shot very well. This is excellent cinematography.
And with all of the Zack Snyder movies, it's not that part of the movie that's the bad part. the cinematography, like you're saying, everything looked incredible. The fight scenes I really enjoyed. Uh, I watched it again, and seeing areas of Detroit that I drive through on a regular basis in this movie, that made it extra for me. It was kind of cool, and it's kind of cool to see those buildings falling down. You know, obviously don't in real life. They did a really good job with it. It looked pretty real.
And then I think another thing we all agree on was Hans Zimmer and Junkie XL's score. I mean, Hans Zimmer is always tremendous. Every score he does for a movie is always tremendous. And you know, one of the things I think really stands out to me, and we keep hearing it, is the Wonder Woman theme that he put together. I mean, it was in our own movie. We saw it in the trailer for Wonder Woman 84. I just think it's a fantastic theme, and it's probably my favorite theme of any superhero I can think of. Now, Darth Vader's theme, you know, ranks right up there. And while I was watching this movie, rewatching it, I should say, that I just, you know, recently did, I found myself focusing on the score a lot and like listening and not paying attention to what was going on. And then I have to rewind and be like, okay, I better watch that scene again to make sure I knew on. But man, the score just really just hit hard, and I thought it was tremendous.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, Keith. The score was very remarkable in several scenes. There were even a couple of less than stellar scenes in the movie, but it's almost like the score saved it.
Yeah, I thought the music fit. I didn't put too much thought into it because I was mostly thinking about the plot. But with me, if I notice a score, and it's usually in a bad way. You know, some movies really get me pepped up with the score, like say the Avengers movies. But other than that, if I really notice it, then it's something bad, and I didn't notice it here. So I think they did a good job.
And then one more thing I think we kind of all agree on is the fight scenes in this movie. The Batman warehouse fight scene was absolutely tremendous. It could be one of my favorite Batman fight scenes in any movies. I mean, I love the Nolan Batman films, but I mean, the fight scenes were great, but this was almost next level. And then we had the fight with Doomsday. I mean, with all the CGI going on and everything going on, it still looked incredibly well. And having the three people and all the stuff going on, it was just very well. The choreography for that was just amazing, and it really worked.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, there were a couple of excellent fight scenes even between you know, Clark and Bruce when you know, when they're fighting in the warehouse and a couple of other things like that. Even the driving, as ridiculous as some of that was, the driving scene. So I think this kind of ties into the fight choreography. I thought that was shot really well. That was done very cool. The scenes, especially in the future or dream sequence, you know, whatever you want to call it, that was done very well too. That was so yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's all choreographed very well. The fights, the meaning for the fights is different for me, but actually seeing the actual action is just off charts, kick ass.
So a couple of minor things that I do want to mention that are good but not great. But before we get into the bad, so I do like in parts of the movie where they characterize Bruce Wayne, where he decides that he's going to risk his own life and he's going to save people. Now, before they get into who this Batman actually is, this is a nice scene. They also, Zack Snyder tries to redeem this version of Superman a little bit. We're discussing this, where this Superman finally gets around to saving someone. So that was also nice to see that.
No, and it really was. That first scene, and we kind of talked about it before this video, where Bruce Wayne is running to the Wayne building in Metropolis while Zod and Superman fight, was really who Batman is. He's going and trying to save everybody there as much as he can. And that was just portrayed well. I had really high hopes for Batman in this movie after seeing that scene, but you know, we'll talk about the path he went down later on in this video. And now, unfortunately, we're going to get to the parts that we consider bad in this movie. And the first one, and I think we're all in agreement on this, is Lex Luthor's portrayal in this movie. I know I had been talking to Doug, and Zach had said he wanted to go with a socially awkward tech-like guy. And for that role, he got the right guy, Jesse Eisenberg. Unfortunately, that is not Lex Luthor, in my opinion. He's more of a tactician. He's super intelligent. He never wants to look weak in any situation. And that definitely was not portrayed well in this. And to the editing room.
Yeah. So, yeah, I definitely agree with what you just said. Getting the actor to portray, getting Jesse Eisenberg to basically recreate an even more extreme version of Mark Zuckerberg is a bit out there. So either make this a completely different character altogether than Lex Luthor, make this some sort of, psychotic tech genius who happens to stumble upon the Zod ship or whatever, or maybe recast this. So those are the two methods that I would go about in fixing this in our editing room.
Yeah, I agree. This was a terrible casting as Lex Luthor. I mean, like you guys said, he's a calculating, cool genius. He's not a bumbling fool. I think that Jesse Eisenberg took his inspiration for this character from the Gene Hackman bumbling Lex Luthor and combined him maybe with the Kevin Spacey, but it just didn't work. And we've said for a long time, I think we said in our first original review of this movie that we thought maybe he played the Riddler instead, but I even think the Riddler was a more serious character than this Lex Luthor. So in my opinion, the only way to fix this character is to recast him. And Keith, did you have an idea who do you think would be a good recast?
And I definitely agree with Dave. I think it needed to be recast. I want to see Lex Luthor in this movie because who else would try to be pitting Superman versus Batman to get his way other than Lex Luthor?
Well, and certainly not this guy.
Yeah. And I think Bryan Cranston, who was up for this role, at least in certain trades were saying he would be perfect. I mean, his Walter White was tremendous. I think he could have played that super cool, super genius, always in control, always, doing the right move, steps ahead of everybody else, or at least he thinks he is. And I think that would have just made Lex Luthor 100 times better in this movie. Because every scene that Jesse Eisenberg was in, the Cherry Jolly Rancher scene, him talking in front of that group at his charity event where he's like kind of stumbling over words. And I'm just like, it was very hard for me to swallow. I just could not see that as Lex.
Yeah, definitely. What you were talking about before, the fact that this is supposed to be some sort of socially awkward, kind of weird dude who, doesn't really get out in public that much, but is still the billionaire owner of this gigantic company. First off, how the hell did that happen? Because in the comics and TV shows and everything, LexCorp is not like a software company where you can have this weird, socially awkward, bumbling guy. I'm pretty sure, isn't LexCorp like a weapons company or something like that, or a defense contractor of some kind? Like, isn't that the kind of area that they generally are involved in?
They're a conglomerate. They own tons of businesses, and most of them, there are a lot of defense contracts involved with Luthor Corp.
Yeah. So basically you would, if you want Lex in this movie and you want LexCorp and you want him, being the scheming guy that's pitting Batman versus Superman to create this movie, to make the movie happen. Yeah, you have to recast it completely. If you are still going to be obstinate and you're going to cast Jesse Eisenberg and this is the sort of role and you're trying to create a new version of Lex, it has to be toned down. It really does, because like Keith said, it was very hard to swallow. It's difficult to buy this character. So if you're going to keep Jesse Eisenberg and you're going to keep this sort of portrayal, which I disagree with, then you really have to tone it down. You have to make him maybe a bit quieter. Just stop talking. Stop being weird. Sit down, sit still, take some medication. I don't know. Just tone it down, kid. Seriously, it's very hard to buy that this guy is like an nth level genius that calculated out this whole plan and also, by the way, somehow managed to figure out who the secret identities of Batman and Superman are.
Yeah, and that scene with where Batman and Superman meet and he walks over, that is one of the hardest scenes for me to watch because he's just like, oh, this guy has a great handshake. It was like almost Rodney Dangerfield-esque there for a moment. I was just like, oh man, that was about as cringy as I've seen a scene with Lex Luthor in any level, comics, movies, TV. It was probably the worst thing I've ever seen.
Right. Are you to believe that this is the guy who's going to go toe to toe, brain to brain with Superman? No, I don't see it. Not at all.
No, see, that's the other thing. You bring up a good point when you mentioned going toe-to-toe with Superman. That's something else that Lex in other versions of the media has always kind of prided himself in, the fact that man could be just as powerful. And most other portrayals of Lex, yeah, he's not going to be as muscular as, Bruce Wayne or as, Clark Kent. But he generally keeps himself relatively fit. And when he can't fight Superman with his own muscles, he augments it with some sort of machinery.
And what bothers me about this imagining of this character is that I saw in an interview, Zack Snyder said he took his inspiration from canon, from the comics. And I don't remember seeing Lex like this in the comics as a like we described, a kind of a bumbling idiot who's supposed to be really smart, maybe an idiot in an antisocial way, but still, I've never seen him portrayed like that.
Maybe he meant his own tie-in comic to this movie.
Maybe.
And the thing is, too, if he would have been that, defense weapon contract person, it would have made a little more sense that they gave him access to that ship, because he could have been like, yeah, I need to examine it and reverse engineer it so I can weaponize this for the United States. Instead, he was just like, I need to get in there. Can I get in there? Yeah, sure. Give me that Cherry Jolly Rancher, and you can get in there. It's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. None of his motivations were made very clear. So that's the other thing that we would have to fix about Lex Luthor. I'm not one for, spelling out every aspect of a movie. Sometimes you do have to suspend some disbelief, but you've got to make the motivations of your protagonist and your antagonist clear. You've got to let the audience know, what are they trying to accomplish and why are they trying to accomplish it? Otherwise, you're not watching the movie. You're sitting there wondering, why did he do that? Why is he doing that? Why is he acting like that? Why is he going into the ship? What, so some of these things were attempted to be solved by the extended release of the movie, but it still wasn't. It still wasn't really made clear what he was trying to do. So, way that we would fix it. Exactly. Yes. So a way that we could potentially fix this is either have Lex Luthor be more of a background character like he normally is, where he's scheming and conniving and he's trying to, get Batman and Superman to fight, and have him be more of a background where he's stirring the pot and he's egging them on, without them realizing that that's what he's doing. So maybe have him do something like that, or perhaps we can, come up with some other sort of reasoning as to why he even wants them to fight to begin with.
We can definitely get to that when we talk about changes to the plot, which I think is going to be something we're going to, take to the editing room. I think next on our list, and I think it was on all of our lists also, is Batman.
Absolutely.
I myself did not like the way the murdering and branding Batman. I get why they did it. They needed to have a reason that Superman would have his doubts about the Batman. And it's, him being the Boy Scout that he is, having, Batman gunning people down, which, in my opinion, Batman would never do. When you see your parents murdered in front of you, he understands the toll it takes on people. He would never murder someone, especially someone he didn't know. He's almost like Dexter. He'll beat the living crap out of somebody, but he knows they're guilty. He knows they're bad. He doesn't just beat up innocent people. So the whole fact that he would, gun people down in the one scene who he had no idea what their backstory was or anything about him, and the fact that he was branding villains just did not sit well with me at all.
Don't forget when he bashed some guy's head into the wall, left a blood smear on it.
What has he said throughout this whole existence? No guns. He doesn't have guns. He's got grappling, a grappling gun, I guess, but no guns with bullets. No bullets. This is not Batman. Batman doesn't do that.
In fact, so we've got a hardcore, gritty, sort of Dark Knight Returns version of Batman. Obviously, that is what Zack Snyder was going for. He's mentioned a couple of times that that was the comic book, the graphic novel that he based this Batman and this Bruce Wayne off of. But even if you're going to go for that version of Batman, which, first off, we'll get into the reasons why that's a bad idea later. But even that version of Batman did not use a bullet. He used rubber bullets. They actually make that very clear in the graphic novel. Even the illustrators and the writers behind that graphic novel series knew that Batman would never shoot anybody with a gun. So yes, he rolled up in a tank. It was meant to be extreme. He was older. He was dealing with a new kind of crime, but he still shot rubber bullets. He wasn't mowing people down with a machine gun.
I mean, and that's always been the thing. And I think this is one of the easiest fixes we have over everything that's going on. You know, make if you're doing the older Batman, if you have to do it, which I still think is kind of silly, you know, you have him just being, you know, just completely beating people to a pulp to get information out of them. And Superman, who is the Boy Scout, would see that and have his doubts about Batman, not knowing who he is or what he stands for. You know, that's one of the easiest fixes in this. And I don't understand, you know, why it was written the way it was. Because, you know, that scene where he's in a ship, and when I first saw it, and he's just like blowing cars away and people are just getting, you know, decimated in this, I'm like, oh, maybe Alfred's controlling it or something. Maybe he's not in it. But it was him, and I'm just like, that is not Batman. That is not anyone's Batman. It shouldn't be anyone's Batman. It just makes zero sense.
Yeah, you know what, Keith? You actually bring up a great point where you mentioned that, you know, there were other ways to sort of get Superman's attention. I like that because if you think about it, that's kind of like an ongoing theme in a lot of superhero comics. If you look at like Spider-Man, how many years did he go where nobody trusted him because the media spun things in a way that made him out to be this untrustworthy vigilante, and it wasn't until he saved somebody's life we're like, oh, hey, thanks, Spider-Man. But the same thing happened in a lot of the Batman comics where it was spun in a way where nobody really knew whether he was a human, whether he was some sort of mutant, what he even was. They just knew it's the Batman and he's a vigilante. And the only people who really trusted him were Commissioner Gordon and a couple of select police officers. Most of the other run-of-the-mill police officers didn't trust him and were trying to arrest him on multiple occasions. So there are ways that you can do that without him being a murder bot.
Yeah, and I just don't like the overall, and we're still talking about the plot. I don't think Snyder understood the characters he was writing. I don't know if I said that before, I'll say it again. It's just that, yeah, if he wants to do a Dark Knight another Dark Knight movie where everything's dark, but if you're going to have Superman in a movie, you know, Superman represents hope. Everything cannot be dark. You know, it can't have. Actually, I think maybe he hit Wonder Woman good, but I haven't seen anything bad from Wonder Woman out of the DC recently. But overall, the characters, it's like he doesn't, you know, for a person who's been reading comics forever, like the three of us, we understand, you know, the level and how far the characters will go normally. I don't think Zach had that. I don't think he had that limit, you know.
No, and we're not the only ones to ever say this either, but Zack Snyder, there's no way that he's actually reading your standard run-of-the-mill comic books like, you know, the three of us would read. He's probably grabbing The Dark Knight Returns. He's probably getting his copy of The Death of Superman and things like that, because while these are good standalone stories, they don't really go together well for this, and they certainly wouldn't normally be used as the setup for Justice League.
And I think we got a good understanding of Zach's not understanding of Superman when he had him kill Zod at the end of Man of Steel. I mean, Superman would do anything he can to not kill. He would find a way, and that's always been his thing. In impossible situations, Superman finds a way to not only save everybody, but not kill anyone in the process. I mean, he goes out of his way to make sure that people don't get hurt. And that we just don't see that out of this Superman in this movie.
And if you want any references to that, watch the whole series of Smallville.
So in our editing room, in fixing this, you've got to use a completely different version of Batman. There's just really no two ways about it. You cannot have this older, dark, gritty, he's been being Batman for like 20 years now kind of character. First off, again, if this is to be used as a setup for Justice League, that alone doesn't make sense. But you also can't pit him against Superman. You can't have him meeting Superman for the very first time and being this jaded version of Batman, where he's actually looking at Alfred and being like, oh, well, I guess it's okay because we're criminals. It's like, no, bro, that's not Batman. And that shouldn't be this universe's version of Batman. So I think we need to dial it back a little bit. I think we need to have a younger version of Batman. Because everything that was done with this version was just wrong. Okay, so you tried to make a Dark Knight Returns version of Batman, but you still have Alfred, so that doesn't make sense. You have him using actual guns, that doesn't make sense. Even in trying to use this version of Batman, you got it wrong. So just don't use this version of Batman at all. Just don't.
No, and I agree. And it was, one of the scenes too, and I know it was just in there as an Easter egg, was the Robin costume with the Joker writing on it. Like, Jason Todd is already dead in this universe, when that's something you should build to happening. I know he wanted to get to the Red Hood faster because that's probably one of his favorite characters. And the Red Hood is awesome, but you build up to it. You just don't have Jason Todd being dead and then, all of a sudden the Red Hood's there. You need to build to all of this. The comics didn't take one day to get to all these characters. You build to it, you let characters flesh out, you build, and then you change things and you get to it. And having Jason Todd dead in this, I know it was done by Zach just so Batman would, it would make a little more sense for why he was acting that way, but it really just wasn't executed well in any way.
Yeah, and the whole, that kind of goes into my next point about the plot, is that we have too many plot lines going on, meaning they were trying to set up trying to set up other movies with this movie rather than concentrating on the story it was telling.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of us agree on that too. I think the plot needs to be changed. There was just so much about it that didn't, make much sense to me. I mean, the first thing that caught my eye about the plot was I think it was 18 months after Man of Steel, and Batman still had no idea anything about Superman. There was no way, if he was on the scene seeing the Wayne building get destroyed by Zod and Superman fighting, which that scene was incredible in this thing too. The way they mixed in scenes from Man of Steel into Batman being on the ground, that was very well done. But the fact that Batman did no research into understanding Superman and who he was after that made absolutely no sense to me.
Right. So you expect me to believe that this psychotic Lex Luthor managed to figure out both of their secret identities, both of their parents' names, and everything, every single aspect about them. But Batman, the Dark Knight, the detective, did zero research into this super alien that he thinks is that big of a huge threat to the Earth.
Well, how about Clark Kent not knowing who Bruce Wayne was when he first saw him?
Are you talking about world-renowned journalist Clark Kent?
Right. I mean, and he's been studying the Bat from Gotham for an article, but he's been to Gotham. He has no idea who Bruce Wayne is.
Well, Gotham is just across the bay in this universe for some reason, which maybe that shouldn't irritate me, but I'm like, okay, that makes zero sense that Metropolis and Gotham are like right across a small piece of water.
Yeah, no, that bothered me too, because, okay, Gotham is supposed to be like this just horrible shithole of a city, and then you've got Metropolis, the shining beacon of wonder, but it's separated by what, like a little river?
Right.
Okay.
It's like Detroit and Windsor.
Okay,
wait, which one?
point.
Is Windsor Metropolis?
Detroit would be, no, I'm not going to say.
No, it'd be more like separating Jersey and Windsor.
Yeah, there you go. That's. I think that's a better fit. And honestly, I think this is an easy fix too with the plot. Now, there is so much going on that I think they have to tone it down a little bit. But I think the way to handle this is have Batman learn everything about Superman right after the events of Man of Steel. You know, he knows the type of man he is, and he knows that when Lex begins to start framing him with all of the things that he does, Batman is one step ahead of Lex. You know, and then when Superman comes to get the head of the bat, which I really did not like that, the way they've worded that in the film. You know, Batman tells him, hey, I know where your mother's being held, and it's in one of two places. And basically, Superman goes off to one, Batman over to the other. And then, you know, obviously, the Batman, I want that warehouse scene to still be in there. So, you know, Batman is the place Batman goes to is where she's being held. He saves her, you know, the whole flamethrower thing. That's okay. You know, Martha can say, yeah, I know you wear the cape. I know you're a friend of my son's or whatever. You know, then after that, Superman flies to Lex Luthor to the ship. And that's when he's creating Doomsday because let's face it, Lex Luthor always has a plan on a plan on a plan. He is planning for every contingency. And he's smart enough to know that Bruce Wayne is probably going to see through his plan and maybe stop Superman and turn him and save Martha. So he still has the Doomsday thing. You know, he's that weapons designer. He gets access to the ship. You know, for those of you who saw the Ultimate version, you know, it says, oh, hey, would you like to be the new owner? Would you like this information? And he's like, all of it. And then he figures out about Doomsday. He can still build it. And while they're fighting, because I still want this, you know, the Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman scene to do this, and they're fighting, and of course it's not Batman who has the kryptonite that ends up killing Doomsday, or we won't say killing Doomsday, but at least stopping Doomsday. And that's Lex's stuff that he has as a final contingency. If Doomsday doesn't stop him, he still has his kryptonite weapons and kryptonite to stop Superman. But obviously Batman, being one step ahead, gets a hold of it. They use it to stop Doomsday. Superman is weakened, but doesn't die. And, you know, we talked about this earlier, and I think we're all agreeing, being like the second film in this universe, you can't already have Superman dying because we all knew he was coming back. There's zero stakes in him dying right here. If it was something when Cavill was maybe at the end of his contract and we're like, oh, we don't know what they're going to do, it would have hit a little harder and maybe be out for a while. But next movie, bam, Superman's back. He's ready to go. You know, we'll see all that play out in the Snyder cut of Justice League. But they could have stopped Doomsday, and even, you know, doesn't have to kill Doomsday, and he could keep powering up because we know Kryptonians get their power from our yellow sun. If they somehow stop him and are able to imprison him, he could continue gaining strength. And then when he faces Superman again, maybe alone, that's when Superman dies at his hands. I mean, it just could have been handled so much better, but that's how I kind of would have fixed the plot.
My question is with the spear that he had, I've seen this on other reviews. Why couldn't Superman just throw it instead of have to fly it into him? And would he be able to fly with the kryptonite, you know, holding a kryptonite spear? Would he be able to fly? You know, it doesn't really make sense. And what you just alluded to with maybe not killing Doomsday, I'm going to go back to Smallville again on this. What they did was they took him and they buried him under, I think it was 6 miles of earth. And, you know, that way he's out. But, you know, since he made such a small appearance in this movie, he could come back later on. You know, he might not. But at least they've taken him out of the action for a while. You know, and then if they bring him back, it could be a lot more epic than it was in this movie, because this movie did not focus on that story. That was kind of the afterthought story.
Yeah, that's exactly. I mean, Dave, you're absolutely right. They could introduce him here. He stopped, but you let him have a whole nother movie, The Death of Superman, where Doomsday is the main villain. He gets the screen time. You learn more about it. I mean, it could have been epic had they not rushed to The Death of Superman.
Yeah, you know, I have to agree. This is obviously the biggest fix that we need to correct in our editing room is the plot, or the plots, the multiple plots. There were too many of them, and we were kind of talking about this before we started recording today. But that is definitely something that Zack Snyder is known for. Is he has very plot-heavy films where he's got a lot of stories that he wants to get through, but he doesn't have enough time to get through them all. And what ends up happening is you've got the studio intervening and then try to cut this stuff down. And that's why you've got situations where now a Snyder cut is necessary in order to make up for what he originally wanted to release. So obviously that was not, the case with it. We did get our extended version, but I still don't think it was enough. There were too many things that he was trying to cover in one movie. So let's kind of first sort of lay out our deck of cards of plots, if you will. So we've got the overarching story of Batman not trusting Superman because he doesn't see him as a human. He sees him as this alien who might be some sort of overlord of the Earth, okay? Then you've got Superman, who in his journalistic ventures discovers this vigilante in Gotham that he just happened to find out about. And he thinks that maybe he's taking it too far because that is one kind of aspect of Superman that kind of got right, where he's his morals are taking over, where he's like, okay, this is bad. He shouldn't be acting like that. That's not how you superhero.
The one thing I want to interject here, I kind of also, as I was watching this again, obviously the Joker had killed Jason Todd. Batman has been around for all these years, but still no one really knows who he is. I mean, come on. If the Joker is really the Joker, he's having these super elaborate plots, getting all of the screen time, doing the things the Joker does, so everyone would know who the Batman was. They made it seem like he's had all of these adventures, but no one knows anything about them. It just didn't fly with me.
No, absolutely. And especially if we're supposed to believe that the Joker in this universe is the Jared Leto Joker, I mean, as nuts as the few scenes that he managed to have in Suicide Squad, he was crazy. He was psychotic. So yeah, totally agree with you there, Keith. Then we've got this weird Lex Luthor plot where, again, he's not really clear on what his motivation for doing any of this really even is. At one point, he's screaming about his daddy issues. Another point, he's talking about how Batman and Superman are like gods and demons and devils, and man needs to defeat God, and you're a false god, and he kind of does all this whole big spiel. But here's the thing: we've been talking about Batman and Superman, but in this universe, not only does Batman and Superman exist, but so did Wonder Woman at one point. We've got plenty of movies of that. So does Aquaman, potentially. People are talking about him. If Batman is aware of this, then obviously Lex Luthor should be as well. But then we've got the Flash. So he's obviously made a name for himself in Central City. Why is Lex only focused on these two? If this is really how he feels, if this is really his motivation, that I need to take down these people, why is his focus only on Batman and Superman?
Yeah, and that's an excellent point. We know Lex knew about him because we saw the scenes, and one of the things I would change too is the Aquaman scene in this movie. Don't make him holding his breath. I mean, he breathes underwater. He shouldn't be holding his breath. I just thought, that was a little ridiculous.
Yeah, definitely. So then you've got the other plot point, which I'll admit was cool. It looked cool, and as a nerd, I enjoyed it. But the idea of sort of introducing the Injustice universe, where you've got fascist overlord Superman taking over the world, and steampunk Batman with his trench coat and goggles trying to form a coalition against Superman. So in the theatrical cut, this was kind of played off as a dream. In the extended cut, it was we were led to believe that it was actually Flash from the future letting Bruce know. And we know that that's what Zack Snyder was intending, because when Bruce wakes up, all the papers around him are still flying around. So we know that that's probably what happened. We know that the Flash has time travel abilities. So I guess he was trying to use this as a way to set up Justice League. Again, it was just poorly executed. We can really cut that whole thing out. That didn't even need to be there. It was a cool, fun little scene, nice nod to another universe, other than the 3 comic books that Zach has managed to read, but not necessary. I would just, in the editing room, cut it out. Don't even need it.
Agreed.
Yeah, I mean, it was a nice nod. It brought Flash into it, but it wasn't needed. I mean, you could have Flash come in Justice League. You could have Flash come in his own movie. Once again, it's the common theme we've talked about this whole time. He wants to bring so many different plot threads into his movies and so many different Easter eggs, and he wants to show his comic book knowledge. Put Jason Todd there, have the Flash here, have Aquaman. Lex knows everybody, but the world's greatest detective is clueless that there's even metahumans out there. It was just a jumbled mess.
Mm-hmm. And I'd say the final plot, you guys have mostly talked about this already, but oh no, I'm sorry, two plots. The idea of Batman even fighting Superman needs to just be reworked. The fact that they sort of jumbled together Batman fighting Superman for the very first time in the formation of the Justice League. That's been done a couple of times in the comics, but it was usually a very quick scuffle with Batman using it as a learning opportunity to figure out who his enemy even is. So that's generally the purpose of that in in comics and animations and movies where they're putting together the Justice League when they first meet for the first time. It's usually nothing, like extravagant. This fight where you've got Batman donning his armor from The Dark Knight Returns and, using his tank-like Batmobile and all of this stuff. This sort of fight was supposed to take place in a wholly different universe where Superman actually is working for the government, where Batman can no longer trust Superman and therefore has to take these extreme actions. That is not this universe. It just didn't belong.
No, and one of the things that, part of my plot thing, they never fight, and they shouldn't fight. And that's why, even change the title in our editing room, change the title of this to like Batman and Superman or World's Finest, something that isn't, let's make this dark and these heroes are going to fight. I mean, you didn't build to that point to get it to there. So don't have it. Have them be allies. Have them be
right.
Allies
Absolutely.
that are a little skeptical of each other in the ways they deal with criminals, but still allies.
I totally agree with you. Yeah. I think more people would have enjoyed seeing that movie, seeing their two favorite superheroes team up with each other to fight a greater evil or something, maybe a little mistrust here and there, but in all out brawl, who really wants to see that?
And it's like, this is what comic book fans wanted to see for a long time, those two on the screen together. But the story was just like we said, it's just like the shallow, pedantic story that doesn't really go in depth on why this would happen. It's kind of sad.
Yeah, in a couple of different interviews, even Zack Snyder is saying, he's like talking to himself, well, how do I get them there? How do I get them to form the Justice League? Well, I need them to fight. I don't know why he thinks that. I don't know how he came to that conclusion, but that was the conclusion that he came to. He was already thinking about having them form the Justice League, but for whatever reason, they had to fight to get there, and I don't get that.
And there's so much history of comics between Batman and Superman. You could have chosen so many different ways to have them need to team up to fight a bigger evil without fighting each other. I mean, this just could have been, like Dave said, we've waited for years. I mean, we got the first Superman movie in 78. We got, Batman in 1989. And I think most people like us wanted to see them team up in a movie. Man, if you would have told me that this was going to be the first time we saw them team up was in this, I would have been a disappointed kid watching those earlier movies. It was just not worth the wait.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yep.
So let's kind of talk real quick about Doomsday one more time, because there's a couple of points that I want to plot-wise that I want to bring up. So while we did mention that visually speaking, this did look pretty cool, and he definitely in a couple of scenes he looked like Doomsday. The fact that they decided to create this Doomsday out of the body of Zod, I'm unfamiliar with them ever doing that before. Has that ever happened? Are you guys aware of that ever happening in the comics?
I am not. I mean, if you guys know in the comments, let us know. Doomsday was always this alien being with immense power who, seeked out powerful beings to fight. And that was kind of what he was. He was never that I knew, a Kryptonian, mixed with the genetics of a
Lex
human.
Luthor.
And
Yeah.
it just, once again, another point just mashed in that really didn't make sense and didn't need to be there.
Yeah. So in one or two instances in animated movies and TV shows, they showed Lex Luthor creating Doomsday as opposed to him being an alien species. They showed him creating him, but he was just a genetic clone. And I believe, if I remember from the animated feature, Bizarro Superman was kind of in that same vein of him trying to create something to go up against Superman. But at no point was he a Kryptonian, or did he use Kryptonian DNA or anything like that. And at no point did kryptonite ever present itself as its potential weakness for him. So, yeah, again, just the entire presentation of Doomsday, just like with their presentation of Batman, just like the presentation of Lex Luthor, just done wrong. Just maybe they should have put it back to the drawing board, taken it to their own editing room maybe, and sort of figured out a different way for this Doomsday to appear. Or if you want to go the route that your genius billionaire tech mogul Lex Luthor creates him somehow, why out of the body of Zod? Why do you have to do that? So I would have maybe gone a slightly different route, have it be maybe some sort of genetic cloning experiment. Maybe you get Amanda Waller involved or something, so it can be a little bit of a nod to Suicide Squad or something like that. You can get some of the genetic experiments in there. You could maybe go about it that way. But yeah, I would not have made this type of mindless Doomsday, because I believe in the movies and in the cartoons and in the comics, Doomsday generally still talks. This one didn't really. I don't know what this was. He was like a zombie Zod.
And he was kind of mutating as he fought. When he first appeared, he wasn't very Doomsday looking. But then as he was getting hit and beaten, he started getting the Doomsday look to him a little bit. And maybe that's where they were building to.
Kind of like Black Panther's suit, where if you hit it, you become stronger. Doomsday was always, the more you kill him, he could be killed, but obviously he wouldn't stay dead. He would come back. His body would adjust to whatever killed him, and then he would now be impervious to that again. So the same thing with kryptonite. You hit him with it. Let's just take the Smallville example again. He's from Krypton, and kryptonite is supposed to kill him, but he's Doomsday, so he adjusts to the kryptonite, and you can't kill him with kryptonite.
Well, even having the same weakness as the hero just seems a little bit silly. It almost like they need to make him be the Juggernaut, where you can't stop him, but you can contain him, hopefully, and at least slow him down and get him imprisoned and get him somewhere. He's going to come back, but you can't kill him with the same thing that hurts your hero. That just is a little silly, in my opinion.
Yeah, in most instances of Doomsday appearing, he's like the ultimate match for Superman, and it's very rare that Superman is actually able to defeat him on his own. Usually he needs the help of other objects, like some sort of other, weapon, or he needs other members of the Justice League. In fact, there are a couple of other animated movies where the entire Justice League had to come together to help fight off Doomsday. So if you're going to put him in, maybe make it a Justice League movie, instead of the villain that they chose for that movie, for the Snyder cut. In fact, don't even introduce Darkseid yet. Maybe make it Doomsday. Maybe that's a good way to get them together, because Superman can't fight him on his own. Maybe he's only able to knock him out or to disable him for the time being, but he's going to come back, and like Dave mentioned, he's learning and he's growing stronger. So maybe that's what's going to happen. So and it gives another reason for the Justice League to get together. But otherwise, I don't even like the idea of Doomsday being in this movie. I feel like maybe they should have chosen some sort of other crisis for Superman and Batman to team up against.
Well, and what is everyone's opinions? Do you guys, who should have been the villain in this? Do you agree with our changes in the editing room to make it a better film? Or do you think this was a masterpiece as it stands? We're more than happy to talk to anybody in the comments, leave what you think. We'll definitely respond, and we'll get a conversation going. And, we're all comic book fans here, and let's hope we keep it civil.
So remember, not your status quo cut.